You know, when companies first contact me for a review, I kind of get a similar thing every time. A shiny, overly polished statement about how the microphone is good for anything. Or at least they don't point out the faults, and that totally makes sense. After all, when you think about it, these people's job is to make these microphones interesting so reviewers will take a look at them. But that didn't really happen here. With Lauten, I had a conversation with one of the founding members, and the first thing he did was start telling me all of the things that the microphone perhaps isn't the best for, or just isn't perfect for, or how the frequency response isn't necessarily tailored for a scenario B or C or things like that. And you know, I haven't really experienced that. And I think that says a lot about the brand. I mean, we're all creative people, right? And a lot of us can probably relate to an experience such as the following. When you show your friends your mix for the first time, your project for the first time, hey, stop with the camera. Here, get off. When you show your friends your mix, or you ask a fellow engineer or something like that, we've all got these little expository statements that we give right at the beginning. It's not done, or I'm not sure about how the vocal sits, kind of stuff like that. All these sort of defensive statements about what we've just crafted because we care about it. But in reality, there's a good chance that a lot of these listeners probably wouldn't have thought too much about what you said in the first place. You're in your head about the quality of the piece that you've just crafted because you see all of the little tiny details, all the tiny details that weren't there in the beginning because you started with a blank project. You've been through every single step of the process and you know it like the back of your hand. Well, that was kind of my first indication that Lauten really gives a shit. The company spoke like an artist that's hesitant to show their final piece because it's not perfect yet. When to everyone else, it's fucking awesome. Because guess what? This mic is awesome. Here's the basic premise. The LS-208 is a large diaphragm condenser microphone that is designed to have a similar amount of room rejection as a dynamic microphone. Kind of the best of both worlds. The largeness and the detail of a condenser while still being able to use it in a less than ideal environment. Not having to worry about your neighbor's dog outside or the street going past. Now, before giving you my take on whether or not this microphone achieves that, let's take a step back and look at this microphone just for its basic spec information, its tone, and then we'll go into kind of the comparisons to dynamic microphones and their sound rejection. Now, as I go through this process, I'm a little bit torn on how to present this microphone. It's not that easy to put it in a box. Say that's good for a condenser or that's bad for a dynamic, because as you'll learn, this microphone kind of exists in this in-between area. Yes, it is a condenser, but a lot of the spec information will lead you to believe it's more of a dynamic microphone. Lauten is using a 32mm capsule with a sub 15 dBA self noise, and that kind of puts it in the threshold to make it useful for voiceover applications. It requires 46 decibels of gain to reach around -12 dBFS, which makes it a really hungry condenser microphone, but not at all hungry dynamic microphone. Kind of see where I'm going here? It's in between. And it can reach the full spectrum of 20 Hertz to 20 kilohertz. Now, a lot of dynamic microphones, they're going to stop around the 45 Hertz range, and at the very top end, stop around the 18 kilohertz range, meaning you're kind of getting most of the extremes of human hearing, but you lose the deepest sub-bass and the highest transients. Now, this microphone has a few onboard switches, including a high-pass filter. That means you can cut out the 50 Hertz and the 120 Hertz. But it also has a low-pass filter, meaning you can cut at 10 kilohertz or 8 kilohertz. I really like this because suddenly, rather than just cutting out the mud, you can actually use this microphone for a little bit more creative tonal crafting before the microphone is inputted into the software. Now, personally, whenever it comes to vocals, I tend to keep these things flat. I would just prefer to do all these kinds of shaping within Ableton. But for a lot of other applications, I can see the low pass filter being really useful for things like a snare. You know, large diaphragm condensers on a snare are usually pretty bright and snappy. But if this is your only microphone that you're working with in this scenario, you can get a darker tone out of that. That makes it really good for things like toms too. I could even see this being used as a kick mic. Now, this microphone also comes with a lot of really cool peripheral support. You get a shock mount with it. You get a foam filter, you get a mic clip, and of course the microphone. All of that coming in a hard case. Really nice one too. I really actually would like to commend Lauten on providing everything necessary to get the most out of this microphone without having to spend extra. All too often we find things like a shock mount left out of the equation, looking at you, TLM 102. Hard cases left out of the equation, all these things extras to buy later. You know, this is actually a theme with Lauten. I have the Clarion, which we'll see in a couple weeks. It is the same story. So let's talk about the frequency response really quick. mic. Let's pull it up, and if you look at it, I think I've seen this frequency response before. Let's pull up the RE20's frequency response. That is very similar. A near true flat signal with a small presence boost starting around the 7K, and then rolling off those upper transients after that. And this is something that I specifically wanted to talk about, because the LS-208 for me sounds a lot like an RE20. I mean, the RE20 is already a very condenser-like microphone, so that kind of makes sense. And as I alluded to a little bit earlier, I think the main difference between the RE20 and the LS-208 is the 208's extension beyond 18 kilohertz and beyond 45 kilohertz. The RE20 already has really great extension into these regions and maintaining a flat frequency response up until those extremes. But the 208 is that, but more. You'll notice a little bit more low end, and you'll notice kind of this halo effect, which you may or may not like. And we'll get to that during the blind reviews. But this is one of the main reasons why I really like this microphone, because I really like the RE20. And it's a hard vibe to replicate, if I'm honest. I really haven't heard another microphone that sounds like the RE20 before. So this is kind of a crisis moment. I may prefer the sound of the 208 over the RE20, even though they're very similar. But way back at the beginning of this review, I talked about how this microphone is a large diaphragm condenser aiming to have a similar amount of rejection as a dynamic microphone. Well, it is very good at rejection. I would say up to par, if not better than the average dynamic microphone. And you'll see that in a test we're about to do. I do think the RE20 is just a little bit better. On the spectrum of, let's say a TLM 102 is like a 1 out of 10 in terms of noise rejection. And let's say a 10 out of 10 in terms of noise rejection is an RE20. I would say that the LS-208 is like an 8.5 probably. But let's do our own little non-scientific test ourselves between the SM7B, the RE20, and the 208. So this is me 7 inches away from the microphone. This is me like 3.5 feet away from the microphone, probably. This is me like 10 feet away from the microphone on the opposite side of a 13-foot room, I guess. This is me 7 inches away from the microphone. This is me 3.5 feet away from the microphone. This is me like 10 feet-ish away from the microphone. This is me 7 inches away from the microphone. This is me 3.5 feet away from the microphone. This is me 10 feet away from the microphone. This is me with a cat 10 feet away from the microphone. Right? This wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. Either it goes or I do. And then he died. This wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. Either it goes or I do. And then he died. This wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. Either it goes or I do. And then he died. This wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. Either it goes or I do. And then he died. So, leagues above other condensers, and on average, about the same as a dynamic. Incredibly impressive. You know, I will also say this. If you're upgrading from a dynamic microphone and you're getting a 208, you should expect kind of a different experience. You're going to get more of a condenser kind of level of transient detail. You're going to hear a lot of spit noises. You're going to have a little bit more of a halo around your voice. It will come with a little bit more noise floor. So let me just put it this way. If you have a quiet enough space, not a quiet space, but a quiet enough space, doesn't have to be sound treated. Just maybe not in the middle of a dense urban environment. Maybe it's a suburban neighborhood. Maybe you have a carpeted floor or a large rug, but no soundproofing. Anything that's just not super reflective. I think this might be the best all-rounder microphone for that scenario. And I know that is a lot to say, but hear me out, because Lauten has succeeded in creating a condenser sound with rejection leagues above other condensers, just not the heavy-hitting dynamic microphones. I will also say though, if you're miking something really far away, ambient miking using a condenser microphone, this is not the condenser for that either. But for that, you get an incredibly high level of transient detail with the confidence to use it in endlessly more scenarios. Take it to band practice. As long as you're not in a heavy metal band, you're not going to get a lot of feedback. Then then use it in your untreated room to record final vocals. And it's a pretty flat microphone too, making it useful for a lot of different scenarios, and you can carve the EQ curve later. It also comes with everything you need, including a very good custom shock mount and a hard case. I mean, guys, this is kind of checking all the different boxes that I look for in a microphone. So this microphone gets the official AudioHaze stamp of approval and should go on the top shelf with a bunch of other microphones that I have a ton of high praise for, like the RE20, the OC818, and the SM57. It deserves a place at the top. And I also genuinely don't know why other microphone companies aren't trying to do a similar thing. I feel like every microphone company should have this kind of microphone in their lineup. So well done, Lauten. I really like what you've done here. So let's do some tests. We got Ethan Toga. Please check out his Instagram and YouTube if you haven't already, because he is a crazy amazing vocalist. We're going to do the SM7 versus the RE20 versus the 208 there. I've got a guitar test against another flat condenser microphone. This one, just a Rode Into one. I think it's a good baseline. And you be the judge for yourself.
I just wanna be known. I don't wanna be seen. Keep my name in the credits. Keep my face off the screen. I don't wanna be famous, but I might dye my hair. At least I've been thinking about it, but I'm scared the internet might actually care. Oh, stop looking at me. Stop looking at me. Oh, stop looking at me. Stop looking at me. I just wanna be known. I don't wanna be seen. Keep my name in the credits. Keep my face off the screen. I don't wanna be famous, but I might dye my hair. At least I've been thinking about it, but I'm scared the internet might actually care. Oh, stop looking at me. Stop looking at me. Oh, stop looking at me. Stop looking at me.
Okay, folks, I hope that was helpful. If you'd like, you can follow me on Instagram at RealAudioHaze. If you'd like to work on a project with me, you can email me at realaudiohaze@gmail.com. Good mic. It's a real good mic.